I do not have a gavel, so we're going to start the meeting. So good afternoon and welcome to the Commission Workshop for October 27th, 2025. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This meeting is going to be led by Kimley-Horn and Associates. It is a joint meeting to discuss the Phase 2 and the land development regulation updates. This is a working group discussion among elected bodies in the sunshine. Meeting facilitator is Kelly Clapper, Vice President of Kimley-Horn. At this time, we need to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we only have 5 mics. It is working, right? We only have 5 mics, and so we're going to need to pass them around, so please be patient as we move forward. And I'm going to start, we're going to do a round table introduction. I will start, and we will go to my right. And I am John Doctor, Mayor of Treasure Island.
Marvin Shavlin on the P&Z and LPA.
Chris Downing on P&Z and LPA.
Ross Sanchez, District 3 representative for the P&Z co-chair and LPA co-chair.
Richard Harris, Chairman of the Planning and Zoning Board and the local planning agency.
Bobby Shaley, Assistant City Manager, Community Development Director.
Mary Ellen Edwards, Assistant Community Development Director.
Dan Billingsley, P&Z and LPA.
Valerie Acree, LPA.
Gary Potenziano, LPA and P&Z.
Arthur Cezanne, Commissioner, District 3.
Arden Dickey, Commissioner, District 4.
Chris Clark, Commissioner, District 2.
And Tammy Vasquez, Vice Mayor and District 1.
Chris, we've got a seat for you here at the front table. All right, and we're going to begin the meeting with understanding what the project is, and we're going to have the presentation from Kimley-Horn.
So good afternoon. My name is Gavin Rollins. I'm the interim city attorney, and I'm going to start out with something that's going to drive a lot of the discussion on this, Senate Bill 180. Senate Bill 180 was recently passed, obviously in 2025. Its original intent, post-hurricane rebuilding and support, and then a late amendment is what is creating a lot of the buzz and discussion. Ultimately, because it affects local land use and your authority as the commission and LPA. The overview of it is it's retroactive to August of 2024, and then it sunsets in October of 2027. So that's the window in which it will impact us. Key provisions, and this is what a lot of the frustration has come up. It basically prohibits any regulations that are, quote, more restrictive or burdensome than those that were in place before hurricanes. And so that is in these discussions and kind of moving forward, any regulations that would be, quote, more burdensome. How that is defined is unclear at this point. There is not any case law on it. There are just some examples, and I'll go over some examples in a minute. But there are a lot of people actually suing related to this, but it is that's kind of the general overview. And then another aspect of it, it applies to all counties. It originally was disaster impacted, but then it's expanded to counties that are touch those And it's enforced through a private enforcement, which is kind of an interesting mechanism. So any person, any citizen may serve notice of their intent to sue, and the locality has 14 days to cure or repeal to avoid the litigation. So that's one of the kind of the accountability mechanisms that the bill put into place for citizens if they have concerns, if they believe something, a land development regulation or a comp plan amendment is more restrictive, then they have the ability to essentially notify that local government, and then the local government can either change the ordinance or regulation, or they can end up possibly facing litigation. So that's one of the concerns a lot of local governments have facing this bill. As we talked about, anyone can kind of, it's prompted at an individual level, which is kind of an interesting mechanism. And examples of impact, this kind of helps you see. So recently in Orange County, Orlando area, they received a letter from the Florida Commerce Department declaring that their comprehensive plan null and void because that it was more restrictive or burdensome. And so that then they ended up having to kind of go back through the process. Town of Windermere wanted to implement a tree protection ordinance that would have required mitigation by developers, and that was determined. The state came back and said this could be considered more restrictive, and so they ended up having to pause that process. So those are two local examples in how this is impacting local communities. There are a number of I'll go forward and then back. These are the local governments that are in a current lawsuit with the state related to Senate Bill 180. So it lists the kind of series of them. And this is their core argument, that it violates the Constitution, that it's too generalized, that creates unfunded mandates, conflict with Florida's Community Planning Act, which required comprehensive plans and those types of things, and then intrudes on home rule, preemption language is too vague, that kind of thing. And the relief they're seeking is that it violates the following, and then other relief. Those are the local governments participating in it. And then some of the stakeholder critiques of this. One concern is, for instance, septic to sewer conversion could be considered more burdensome. Lighting protections, resiliency for flooding, those types of things. All those could possibly be perceived as more restrictive or burdensome, and so could possibly be ruled as not allowed under Senate Bill 180. But there is some good news, it looks like, from the state. If you're against this, that they might come back this session and clarify. So the Senate sponsor of the bill said we're going to potentially have to make some adjustments, clarify the language. But as you're discussing and kind of looking through this, the practical implications are the land development regulations, which is going to be a key part of this discussion. That they can allow for more. They can basically be less restrictive, but if they're more restrictive, more burdensome, then there could be a potential of facing a lawsuit. So just something to keep in mind as you're having these discussions. At this point, I'll open it up if there's any specific questions about Senate Bill 180 and how it impacts the LDRs and this discussion.
Gavin, thank you so much for that Senate Bill 180 overview. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kelly Klepper with Kimley-Horn. I am our team's project lead as it relates to the land development regulations. Bobby Shea, or do we have my presentation? Is it just at the beginning of this one, or? So we're going to have IT help us out for just a sec. There we go. So you may be asking yourself, why am I here? Why am I here in a workshop setting? The big answer to that is we're at the precipice of something, monumental. This is a large undertaking, and instead of kind of going at this with a series of interim discussions, one-on-ones, back and forth with the land planning, the LPA versus the electeds, we often recommend the best thing you can do is to pull everybody together in the same room at the very beginning of these projects and just say, what are we all kind of hearing? What is setting the stage for what we're undertaking as part of this land development regulations update? So it's one of those things, and we've talked about this a little bit, how do you know where you're going if you don't know where you've been? So part of this is we're going to talk briefly, and I say briefly, about the phase one or the cleanup. As Gavin said, there's a context here that, what you've seen is about a third to almost 40% of the phase one discussion at this point with the vintage signs, with some of those processes and procedures and things of that nature. But more importantly, as you're getting ready to see the next batch and it kind of finishes up the phase one, the reason we wanted to kind of talk about that is, when we first started the phase one, that was before the legislation was even thought of. There was other legislation that was out there, but it did not affect Pinellas County and or this jurisdiction, so we were moving forward under the guise of that. However, with the adoption of Senate Bill 180, we then had to go and talk to Mary Ellen and the staff and go, okay, we need to take a quick pause. Let's go back and relook at this because it is retroactive. So that's the reason the landscaping and some of those components have not been brought forth to you. Those items that we were very comfortable in saying we do not believe as professionals these are more burdensome, those are the items that we brought forth to you, and in essence going back and re-looking and kind of testing it ourselves to say, does this meet that more burdensome test? Now, one of the things, and I love this portion of it, as Gavin said, it's the private challenge. However, working with a number of jurisdictions across the state, we've been party to the discussions with Florida Commerce where there's been either the comment regarding a perceived or potential more burdensome and restrictive, and the ask of, well, go back and prove to us why it's not more burdensome. We're currently working with Manatee County not on the components that were just recently determined to be more burdensome with respect to their wetlands and some of their components, including what they refer to as 2128, which is their growth boundary discussion. Those were being done under a different group. But those discussions came about, and it's another one of those things as things continue to kind of evolve, especially as it relates to 180, and also not only with comprehensive plans, but with codes, we have to ask ourselves those tough questions. Hence the reason we're here tonight, and you're going to see me start writing some stuff down on the dry erase board if it doesn't fall on me here. But also I'd be remiss if I didn't say that the young lady in the front here, Miss Brooke Fleming, is a planner with our team. She has been involved in this project for quite some time, working with Mary Ellen and Jackie and those folks. So again, kind of wanted to make sure we've got some additional eyes and ears. If there's specific questions that come up, Brooke and I will be happy to answer those. And the best part about tonight's meeting, it's a workshop. So feel free to ask questions. Feel free to say, hey, can we expand on this as we're going instead of waiting to the end? I know, Mayor, I want to be respectful because we do have a couple of comment cards. So if you're seeing a number of those and you're like, hey, Kelly, we need to make sure and reserve X, just let me know. But in the interim, and we appreciate the folks from the county being here. Mayor, I know our team has worked closely with you just recently, and I appreciate you spending your time with us. But, this is truly something as we start looking through not only the regulations, but also some of these components that could come out of this, whether it's a master plan, which would be separate and apart from anything we're talking about here, but also how do we finance and fund some of these things. So just kind of having everybody in the room to start to see the head nods. Keeping in mind, as the attorney will tell you, we're not making any decisions tonight. We're getting guidance. We're getting some takeaways so that as we leave here, we know kind of what are some of the big ticket items that are most important to this group, so that as we're moving forward with the LDRs and I'll call it the design goals, we know where we're headed. So what is the comprehensive plan versus the zoning? We've talked about this before. There's that community, core community vision, which is established. So bringing together the meeting of the minds to say, this is what we want as a community, and understanding what are those items that are most important to the citizens. Now, having worked over in this community for a number of years and been affiliated with a number of organizations throughout Pinellas County, a lot of the same things that we hear, whether it's Largo or Safety Harbor or Lellman and some of these other areas, are very much the same and similar to what we hear from the residents and from these groups as well. Are we saying you're exactly the same as St. Pete Beach? No. Treasure Island has its own identity, but at the same time, a lot of the same things that Treasure Island is dealing with are being addressed in other areas, including Dunedin and again, Largo and some of these other areas. You all have a unique set of skills, ideas, and more importantly, of values. So we need to make sure that we are reflecting those, and that's where those kind of those core community components come about. And that was actually expressed as part of your adopted comprehensive plan. You know, there are the opportunities for those, like I said, that second phase, which is the comprehensive plan. But then more importantly, consistent with Chapter 163, you know, your comprehensive plan and your code should really be talking together. The code implements the vision. Now, as Gavin has said, you know, the challenge now becomes what's more burdensome, what's not more burdensome. What we're seeing a lot of communities kind of look at this point is taking those big picture ideas and those visions, and instead of saying the thou shall, or to the contrary, going, well, we think you should, it's let's create some additional tools for the toolbox to where, you know, the tools that you have in place right now, let's create some additional options that may actually be able to implement some of those visions so that, you know, if there are things that are most important, then, you know, we're not making those such radical changes to existing zoning district or standards to where we could fall into, you know, kind of in conflict with what the state is identifying. So what are typically in land development regulations? Now, is this saying this is exactly the cookbook for what you should have? No, but, you know, when you start looking through land development regulations or the zoning code or some of those other things, it's very fun. It's fun for me to start to translate some of those visionary items. As we've talked about with some folks once before, I had a young lady come up to me at a workshop and she goes, Kelly, I have no idea about zoning codes. I don't even know why I'm really here. I said, well, tell me why did you come out? And she goes, well, I wanted to learn something. I said, well, tell me about your neighborhood. Tell me about you. And she goes, well, you know, I live in a neighborhood and I'm concerned about my neighborhood being deteriorated. And, you know, my kids don't have the ability to walk to the park. And, you know, actually our park's not that great. And, you know, I'm worried about, you know, crossing the street. So you see, I really don't know anything about codes and comp plans. And I said, to the contrary, you just told me a lot. You're worried about neighborhood stabilization and redevelopment and, you know, property values. You're worried about mobility and the fact of being able to walk from point A to point B. You're concerned about where your kids are going to go play, so those recreational aspects. And guess what? We were able to start to craft some of the vision and, more importantly, some of the code components based off of that. And, you know, she became one of our biggest champions as we were going through some of these processes, just because of being able to listen and start to translate some of that. So again, what are typically in LDRs? You know, yeah, the easy things are zoning districts. Different colors on a map say, okay, well, we can have residential here, we can have commercial here, we can have mixed use here. And what are we going to allow within those areas? And then more importantly, when we start to build a building or we have a use, how far off the road should it be? You know, are there areas where we have certain maximum heights or minimum heights? Do we have heights that are different, we'll say, from the beach side, you know, going back towards downtown? Does this need to be the same heights as what you see in St. Pete Beach? No. Parking. We all love to talk about parking. Parking is one of those things that a lot of communities that going across the country now are saying, especially in downtown areas, get rid of the parking altogether. The market will bear. Somebody's not going to build a use or something like that unless they can actually have sufficient amount of parking. Are we advocating that here? No. Why? Because we're not to that level yet. We haven't heard from the residents and, more importantly, these groups to say, is that something that you'd like to pursue? Density and intensity. That one's a little bit more fun, especially as we start looking through the fact that we are in Pinellas County. We have the countywide master plan for Pinellas, which was a groundbreaking document. And I will say, having worked all across the Southeast, that is a model that a lot of communities wish they could emulate. Why? Because how many communities came together to come up with a common core and vision? And it's held, you know, that test of time from the county all the way to each of the cities. How many areas can you think of that have been able to accomplish that? Very few. So again, there's also some requirements that goes along with that. The city has its own comprehensive plan. There's the countywide comprehensive plan. And basically, the local has to be consistent with the county and all the way up and down. And there's also some provisions that in there talking about, well, you know, if we are going to look at increases in density or do certain things, there's a process working through Fort Pinellas and the staff over there and also the boards that have been established, from the elected officials all the way through to the actual staffing. Landscape and open space, something that's often overlooked a lot of times, especially those open spaces. But then also something that is actually kind of lacking here. I will say that this is something that we definitely are planning for, and it's something we need to be thinking of. Plan unit development or plan developments. Are we saying we're going to give away the farm or take away development rights? Are we saying it's a shortcut to variances? No. What we're saying is, in the cases, and there's not, I dare say there's not one community I've ever worked in that has not had some form of a plan development process in some way, shape, form, or fashion, but you allow for that alternative design that still meets the intent of the code. The creative design, whether it's parking or landscaping, or even some of a mix of uses and changing in building heights and types, and just kind of being able to get a little bit more creative with either greenfield development or, more importantly, with redevelopment. It works equally as well in both situations and setups. Why? Because unfortunately we write our codes to be one size fits all, whether it is a brand new development or a redevelopment, if it's 1 acre versus 5 acres. So what we don't take into consideration is the unique features that may be of a particular piece of property that has a unique shape, or it's got access to something, or there's something right beside it that, just going by the straight code really doesn't fit in with the context. Or more importantly, as things have been, evolving over the course of time, why not let people get a little bit more creative with some of the designs, and more importantly, get away from the standard? And I'll give you a great example. Why do we have landscaping along the buffers and there's a tree every 20 feet? It looks like a row of soldiers. Why not allow the clustering and grouping of those in different areas? Why not incentivize some of the protections of some of those areas for landscaping provisions? Why not allow a mixture of, vertically and horizontally integrated mix of uses? Why not? And you all have heard me say this before. What's that question for those of you, and congratulations on the newest one, the grandkids or your niece or 5-year-old niece and nephew? What's the question they always ask you? And I've used this here before, so hopefully somebody remembers it. 3 letters. Why? Why, how? I drive staff crazy asking those questions. Why? Because I can. 2, because it's, yeah, sorry, Mary Ellen. She will admit to that. It's like, why are you doing that way? Well, it's because we've done it this way. Well, why? Well, because Jesse said so. It's like, well, why does Jesse say so? But at the end of the day, you start asking some of these questions, and the answers that you start to get are, well, it's just because we've done it this way. So then you start asking, some of those additional leading questions of, okay, what else? Can we start, and I hate to use the term thinking outside the box, but can we still do something that's going to be consistent with the vision, allowing some of that creativity, and allow the designers and those master planners and, the architects and things to be creative and fit something within the context of the community that we're all proud of. So, long-winded way of talking about some of the PUDs. I'm going to stop here for just a second, Mayor, and just kind of ask general questions or thoughts on. I will be going into where we are with Phase 1 versus Phase 2, the schedule, and some of these other components here in just a moment.
Yeah, Kelly, I got a quick question. I know today, moving forward, LDRs, you're going to give, you want to hear from us as a combined group, but at the same time, will Kimley-Horn be also giving us some recommendations as well, saying, well, because you talk about planned unit development, that's something that we are currently lacking today, to where Kimley-Horn would say, okay, we've gotten all your feedback, but you should also look into, yes, planned unit development is something that we should be talking about as well, like from a Kimley-Horn consultative approach?
Great question. Yes.
Because that's something that I know that is missing today that could be beneficial in regards to moving LDRs forward.
Yeah, the last thing you're going to hear me say is, well, what do you want to see? Okay, that's fine. And okay, we just start to code to that point. Here's the other, sorry, Brooke, bad dad joke. It's like going to the eye doctor. I'm a huge proponent of what do you like better, 1 or 2? And then 2 or 3. So coming up with some of those real world solutions that what makes sense and start to kind of come up with some of those recommendations. Great question.
How's it going, Kelly? I think we've had this conversation before, but your company and my company's favorite client, we did a lot of CPDs, PDs, whatever you want to call them. It's something that this city tried to approve back in 2017 because it got mixed up with additional height, additional density, and back when the referendums were occurring, it was defeated. I still think it has a valuable tool in this town, and there are about 4 different large tracts in this town that could really use a planned development type zoning category. And my thought is, there's only 11 zoning categories in the whole town. What would be the possibility of making pretty much all the commercial and all the hotel districts into a planned development category rather than a bunch of different ones?
And I'm going to kind of look out of the corner of my eye at Gavin as well. Besides making all of those either grandfathered non-conforming potentially, but maybe for new development?
For new development.
Okay. Okay. Scary to say, it's like, man, I don't want to have that headache. And I'm sure Gavin doesn't either.
No, it would be.
That's one of those things. If that's something that the combined group here is interested in and saying is like, hey, by the way, going forward, redevelopment is redevelopment. The zoning is the zoning. Of course, we don't want to modify that because of especially potential for SB 180. But for redevelopment, can we create a new designation that looks at the hotels or this, or a true mix of uses, whether it's vertically or horizontally, integrated, or even just, I'll say, mixture of commercial uses within one property?
Well, where the creative thinking's got to occur is in our central business district, both the north side and south side of 107th Avenue, the Gators property, as we all call it. Perhaps even something as small as the Thunderbird. The Thunderbird's going along. And last but not least, we need some definite creative thinking when it comes to the Treasure Island Yacht Club. There's a nice chunk of 8 acres over there, and it's got some challenges. Let's just put it that way. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other questions before I keep kind of moving on? Okay. So, quiz time. I always love doing this. And this one is actually courtesy of Brooke. The LDRs must be consistent with Pinellas County-wide plan and applicable special area plan. So which of these are actually linked or more importantly, what order do they kind of fall into? Or are they even linked? Any guesses? All of them. I usually have candy or something like that, but I'm trying not to get to where I'm throwing candy these days. These are all interrelated. So when we start talking about the Treasure Island Comprehensive Plan and the special area plans that you have, we need consistency across and within the countywide plan. That starts to inform, the additional components back to the comprehensive plan, and more importantly, the LDRs and how we're implementing that vision. So all of these are inherently linked one way or the other. And you hear us talk a lot of times about consistency. And, some of the things that as planners and as regulators, and I hate using that term, but as planners these kinds of group, we start to ask the questions, is this consistent with? So if there is a zoning coming through, you really should be kind of looking at, is it consistent with your current LDRs? Is it consistent with your comprehensive plan? Is it consistent with the countywide plan? And asking those tough questions. Does that mean if something has one item that it's not consistent with, that you deny it? No. You start weighing those items and those options. Same thing as we're starting to develop some of these phase 2 components, because we need to make sure that we are implementing the comprehensive plan. We need to be looking at, in the case of the special area plans, what is that specific vision for that area? Because you can actually start to call out within certain areas, whether it's targeted redevelopment or something else, different standards. You can say, as part of this master plan or this area, we're going to look at modifications or incentivization for additional FAR or parking or this, and you start kind of setting the stage for what that is. And, what sounds super easy to do also means that, okay, now we got to put this into practice, which is the code, which is in essence, this coming up will be phase 2. So this is just your portion of the countywide plan and map. I know we've had some presentations from the Fort Pinellas staff. Those folks are very talented. They do a great job. They've got a lot on their plate, to say the least. When you start thinking about the county and all the municipalities as a whole, the special studies that they're undertaking, and it's not just land use, it's transportation, it's housing, it's economic development, it's infrastructure, it's coastal flooding, it's disaster mitigation and recovery, it's all of those things. So again, this is one portion of what that staff undertakes. And again, they start to kind of line out specific to, here we are, in Treasure Island, your portion of the plan. Now, the great thing about this is this Fort Pinellas coming in and saying, Mayor, by the way, we don't like this color on the map. Your next comprehensive plan, you need to have this, this, and this. No. They're helping to assist and to inform, but at the same, so it's your plan and your portion of the plan with them. It is not a top-down or trickle-down type of recommendation or series of recommendations.
I do have a quick question. So going back to that, like just last slide, because it's supposed to be in line. I mean, is there any chance you can explain to us how it got to where currently in the LDRs we have this at 22 units per acre, but in regards to the tourism density in the PRMU core district, it's allowed up to 60. Like, how did we get, if it's supposed to be aligned, like it says, must be, because when we had talked about this, you had talked about them being aligned, but currently the way that we have it sit, it's not aligned.
Correct.
The way that I read it.
So there's a couple of things, and this is where Gavin and I are going to become very close friends, to say the least, because, yeah, you're correct. There are some items that were identified in phase one that were inconsistent between the plans. There's also some of those areas that per the SAPs, they may not have been identified or codified a certain way. And unfortunately what happens is, and this happens all across the Southeast. I work in communities across the Southeast. I mean, literally, if you're a fan of the SEC and football, pretty much minus Missouri and Arkansas, I've done work or doing work in at some point. And what we see, and this isn't a knock on anybody, codes get updated piecemeal. Well, there is this item that needs to be addressed because of sea level rise, or we need to address this because of lighting, or this because of parking. And unfortunately, very much like what happened here with Treasure Island, you have literally, and Mary Ellen and I have had this chat, about 6 to 7 sections of your code that items are placed across. So if you don't know where you're looking in all of those linkages, you'll get one, you may not get all of them. So that's one of those other items where we start to say, okay, where does this look at? What about the cross references? And more importantly, what other chapters does this start to impact? Some communities, it's great because we have what's called a unified development ordinance, so everything's under one big umbrella and it's easy to kind of cut across. Other places like Treasure Island has multiple chapters, and we're dealing with 68, 70, and how many other numbers that are way up in the those areas. And again, 68 deals with zoning, but then there's other portions that deal with other components, and then lighting is under something else. Well, inherently lighting is also tied to site development, which is also regulated by something else. And then processes and procedures was actually in 3 to 4 chapters. So no fault of the cities, but that's part of the challenge of going back and fixing everything.
Yeah, so just because when I was reading through it, I mean, I think that I'm glad, again, being happy to be at the table here with everybody. I mean, this is something that our board has kind of, I don't want to speak for the entire board, but for myself sitting on the board, has struggled. So, again, putting you back on the question to where, when it comes to recommendations from Kimley-Horn in regards to these updates, something like that would be included when it comes to addressing inconsistencies.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Kelly, I have a question too. When you talk about consistency, because that showed up in both the last 2 slides, that expression or term got us to a little bit of trouble recently at LPA meetings and spilled over into the city commission meeting because many of us were interpreting, based on advice we were being given at the time, that we were interpreting consistency as being it has to be exact. So if the county allowed 100 units per acre on this particular land, this parcel, that we felt that we had to be at 100 units per acre. But we later found out that consistency meant we could be more restrictive than that, but we couldn't be over that. Is that can you clarify that a little bit for us?
I'm not an attorney. My youngest son will be in about 2 more years, but we're going to go with Gavin.
I mean, I think you said it well, and consistency doesn't mean it doesn't have to be exactly the same, but it has to be consistent. There can't be major conflicts in it in terms of the overall usage. It's hard to, without a specific example, to extrapolate, but do you have a specific?
Yeah, well, let's use a specific example.
Okay.
And we can use a Thunderbird as an example because they their size parcel allows them under the county code to go up to 100 units per acre. So the recommended proposed changes to change that use that maximum amount that the county would allow. But the city doesn't have to be consistent. We could go with, and I'm just making this number up, I'm not suggesting it, but we could use 75 units per acre. Would that make us inconsistent with the county guidelines?
So 100. I'd like to look a little more in depth on that and kind of break it down, as long as it's overall consistent. But okay.
Yes, you can absolutely be more restrictive. You just can't go above what we allow without an amendment, and we have a process for that if you want to make an amendment. But no, you are consistent if you are at or below the densities and intensities that we allow.
Okay, thank you.
So, just for clarification, because that was on the back end of my comment, I'm not talking about the county comprehensive plan. I'm talking about our own comprehensive plan. So I want to make that clear.
Yeah, we definitely have to be consistent with our own. So you have the obviously state statute, then you have in Pinellas specifically, we have the Ford Pinellas overlay, and then the comprehensive plan, and then our LDRs have to be consistent with the comp plan. But is that what you're saying? Like how much?
In regards to our current setup for our downtown district, we are not having our LDRs line up with our comprehensive plan from a city perspective.
And that's part of the phase 1 is cleaning up a lot of that.
Is it safe to say that Arden's, Commissioner Dickey's inquiry is in the same type of realm of what I'm talking about, or is that completely separate? Thank you. Thank you. Okay, all right. Good? Okay, thank you.
But can the LDRs be less restrictive than the comprehensive plan, or does it have to match it?
Very similar to what the young lady from Fort Pinellas just noted.
Okay,
you know,
so
you can be more, but you can't be.
Gotcha. Or it can be less, but not more.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, your comprehensive plan couldn't call out for 60 units an acre and a maximum heights or whatever else of X, and then all of a sudden the LDRs come in and go, well, we think we got it wrong. We're going to go at 80 and 120 feet. That would be inconsistent at that point. So keeping in mind that there's certain things that the comprehensive plan should do, and there's certain things that the comprehensive plan should not do. And I'll give you a prime example. City of Venice, back in 2016, we actually went through and we were working with the city on the review and the update of their comprehensive plan. Embedded in their comprehensive plan were parking requirements, maximum building heights, in addition to the densities and other things. So one of the questions we started asking the city attorney at that point was, well, if a project comes in and it is asking for a variance or modification even under the PED standards, Mr. Harris, to go above 35 feet, are you requiring them to do a comprehensive plan text amendment? And she said, you're one of the few people that have actually asked that question. I said, what happens if there's a modification to the parking? Because it's embedded in your comprehensive plan. The state had actually said as part of that process, now granted it's almost 10 years ago, you should not have those types of code items in your comprehensive plan. The plan is the plan is the vision the code is the code. So pull those items out and put them into the code. So and that's one of the things that we talk about when we work with communities, again, and working with city and county attorneys to say, just asking those tough questions of why. And a lot of times this was done well before we got here. So then it starts to ask some of those potential questions as far as conflicts or challenges. And so you're not the only ones that are in this situation. Trust me. I'm not going to go through this at length. We've kind of been talking about it. But when we first started this, again, it was a much different time. We had no ideas about two horrible names on this coast being Helene and Milton. We didn't have a lot of the same things that we're dealing with today. And it was a much simpler time, so to speak. But at the same time, there were certain things that we did identify through the Growth Management Act that said, okay, by the way, you just went through and did portions of your comprehensive plan, but what about this? So that was kind of the impetus behind why we started with our phase one. And then, Mayor, I know much like what you all faced with your master plan with Helene and Milton, those caused significant delays because rightfully so, we needed to focus in on our recovery and redevelopment efforts, not plans and codes and things like that. So here's the one thing I will say is you've got a great partner right across a bridge. So, look to them, look to your other partners as well to go, hey, what are you all seeing and hearing as well? And I know you all do that. Again, what we started looking at and going through as part of the phase one was the modernization. And then some of those implementation components that, part of tonight's discussion is what do we want to do from a phase two component? And whether or not that's a master plan, it's some of these design standards, some of these components, and we'll talk about that a little bit as well. So on the left are the items that have been completed up to date. There's a couple of things that you can see. It says in review. Those are items that are currently under review with staff, kind of also going back and doing the Senate Bill 180 back check. But then, once those come to fruition, again, we're going to be moving. We actually have started kind of looking at the phase two approach of what you see right there, which is beyond the code cleanup for the zoning regulations. What else do we need to be identifying? There was a list that we created early on that said this is phase one, this was phase two, but more importantly, being able to get out to the LPA and this group here going, okay, what are you all seeing and hearing? You walk your streets, you understand your constituents, you're hearing those components of what's working, what's not. What's going on from a parking and access situation? What's going on from a signage situation? What are things that are above and beyond the standard, we'll call it state statute component, whether or not it's septic to sewer or some of the nutrient loading and stormwater? But what are those things that we think we might be able to do, or more importantly, that we need? And I'm going to come back to Mr. Harris with the plan unit development. That's something that, it's a tool in the toolbox. Does that mean that every single project needs to be a PUD moving forward? No. Does that mean they have the option of meeting certain criteria? Absolutely. Is that a smart play? Why not?
So in the phase one where you're doing this cleanup, there's obviously with these inconsistencies, I imagine that this State Bill 180 plays into this if we have some that are more which one is more restrictive and which direction you take on that inconsistency? So are you handling that at this point on the phase one?
We are, and that's the reason we have not brought landscaping and lighting and a couple of the other components, including some of the zoning ordinance, because we've been going back and re-looking with staff. Also with some of our external staff. When I say our external staff, so I've got development partners that are not involved with this project, and we're shipping them pieces and parts to go, in your opinion, could this be more burdensome than what's on the books right now? So literally just trying to ensure that, and again, we're not going to be 100%. Nobody can, especially when we hear the terms potentially more burdensome. And as you can see, we've got it on that little box right there, the Senate Bill 180 considerations, and that goes for both phase one as well as phase two. Again, as we start looking through and talking through the different phases, part of it is, what do we want to do as a community? What do we feel the most comfortable with? What, as a city and as elected officials, do we want to start to implement from a visionary standpoint? Now, when we start looking at some of these design goals, are we saying, oh, by the way, Kimley-Horn's going to do a master plan? No. We're going to have, an outreach component where we have the open house, we're talking to residents, and, but at the same time, are we doing the community vision as part of this? No, we are specifically looking at a very core component based off of that scope of services. Does this say that we wouldn't partner with somebody that if the city so desired to do a master plan? No, absolutely. What I would say is if you go that route, we would 100% want to have a seat at the table to be a partner with the city to kind of be asking some of those questions as the visioning process is going on and the master planning process of, okay, this is great. Now, how do we kind of look at it from the code perspective? Or what does this potentially do from our code and the things that we've done as part of phase one? This is a pretty common practice. Not saying that we're sitting there throwing stones at somebody going, well, you can't do that. But just asking them same tough questions of, as they're kind of looking through some of this visioning, what does that look like from the code? And as we've said to a couple of individuals of like, if you are going to go the master plan route, you're going to have community workshops. Have us at those community workshops and break the room up into the vision versus the code. Why? Because people will get outreach overload. They will start to become numb to the process. So if we have visioning and outreach for, we'll say next month, and then 2 months from now, we come back with, we'll say code. First question we always get hit with is, well, didn't we just do this? Well, no, that was for the comp plan. Well, what's different? Because we've got some very intelligent people in this community, but at the same time, they a lot of times will start to kind of mix up comp plan, land use, vision, and code. And it's very simple and easy to do. Was there getting ready to be a question? Oh, okay. This was our initial schedule, and I know based off of some of the discussions that this group has had, this was identified as part of our scope of services. However, what we've also talked to staff about to say is like, if the city desires to go down the path of a parallel master plan or visioning process, probably what we say is, one, you need to be very concise and specific on the timeframes for that plan. It can't drag out too much because you don't want to lose the momentum we have going with phase one and potentially on phase two. But at the same time, can they run kind of parallel or slightly concurrent? Absolutely, and they should, because again, the vision is going to help inform the phase two components of the code. So if you start to go down, like I said, a pathway of master plan and this, don't put the code, my personal opinion is don't put the code on hold until the plan is adopted, because then only thing that you've done is put yourselves another 6 to 9 months or whatever behind the process. Run them concurrently, run them slightly behind each other, and that way people know what's going on, because here's the vision, the plan, and the code all kind of being presented together. So this is where I'm going to start to be a little bit more quiet. For some of you, you're going to be like, oh, I'm surprised it took you this long. But this is the most important part of this meeting. There are no right or wrong answers. This is your big ideas. What are the takeaways? And we've kind of pre-populated this to get your thoughts. Is it about the master plan? Is it about funding? And I know, especially with our county partners here, those 3 little letters that start with a C could be a 4-letter word. And we're not advocating, oh, thou shalt do a CRA. No, we're just saying there's funding options out there across the board. Are there CRAs in Pinellas County? Yes. Are there challenges? Not challenges, but is there increased scrutiny because of the number of CRAs that the county currently has? Absolutely. Should there be? Absolutely. But, it doesn't always have to be a CRA. There's other ways to do certain things. And that's where I'm saying, creative funding can come into play with some of these components as well. Are we concerned about design standards? Well, what do the buildings look like? Is it not only the placement, but also what the windows look like? Or what are those other items for consideration that we want to make sure we're kind of looking at from phase 2 and moving forward? So with that, and I've used this once before, but this was courtesy of my professor in college. And actually, we kind of pare it down a little bit, but questions, comments, perplexities, anomalies, or other general paranoia.
CRAs. So what alternatives are there to that? I mean, CRAs in theory are a beautiful thing, But I was in St. Pete Beach as a commissioner, and we tried to get in CRA through the county, and we couldn't get approved. And we tried for several years, and I don't think they ever got approved. So is the county open to CRAs? We were told it was because we were in a low-income area. And, you know, the beaches are not going to be low income. So does that mean we're SOL on that, or?
Commissioner Owen, you might touch on this. I don't believe we've had a CRA come our way since I've been on the commission. I do know that the CRAs have fallen out of favor with a lot of the members of the commission because they seem to stay dormant and there's no incentive to move it along. So any CRA that comes to the county commission should show a good incentive to redevelop the properties in the CRA. You could say, hey, you know, we're changing this, we're changing that, and this is really going to make it happen. And they would need to be short term. That's just my read on the other county commissioners. It need to be short term. It would be need to be something that's like, oh, well, if you let people do this, it's definitely going to this is going to happen, and it's going to increase the tax base for the city. So, and that's what I would like to see as well. So.
And I will say that is a very, very valid point because, and again, I work with a lot of CRAs across the state. They're out there for 20 years, and you start asking the question, well, what did you do this year? Well, we had a festival downtown. Okay, what else? So, and I would definitely encourage you because, you know, Pinellas County took the step as being a charter county to say, we want measurable goals for these types of projects. There's other partnerships that you can have outside of the CRA with the county. And, you know, the county's a great partner, but the county has a lot of other partners at play here as well. So,
I actually had an in-depth conversation with the chair of the county commission, Brian Scott, last week, as well as Kathleen Peters. And it was made very clear for multiple reasons, but one you mentioned, that Treasure Island being the financial base we are, we have property owners who want to develop. It's not that they, you know, we have properties for sale that no one will develop. We just have, our restrictions are too strict and the ROI isn't there. And they made it very clear that, especially the Chairman Scott, that Treasure Island, I mean, the chances of ever getting a CRA are slim to none. We don't qualify for it. We have developers ready to develop. You know, they're not asking for funding. They're just asking for the ability to be able to build and get a reasonable return on investment. So in speaking to the two commissioners, they both, very similar to what you said, the appetite is definitely not there. And Tarpon Springs was used as a very good example of ones that have gotten them and done nothing with them. And it's been a very poor investment. And it continues to be a poor investment. And not only does the county commission, it appears not have an appetite for it, the governor himself has no appetite for it. And it is one of the things that he discourages. And so it's kind of a trickle down. It starts in Tallahassee and definitely has come to Pinellas County. So I just kind of wanted to touch on that with what you had said because I did have those conversations at length last week.
Well, when they say you're not doing anything, what do they want us? I don't understand. What's that mean? We're not doing anything.
So the way it was described to me with Tarpon Springs was the example given was they presented, they were given their CRA, and literally no development. It just sat there, and basically the property devalued, et cetera, et cetera. So in the meantime, you know, of course, they didn't mind taking the funds, and again, it's one you could definitely look up and take a look at that. But that was the one that was given to me as an example, and it was because nothing was done with it. The CRA was given for particular area in Tarpon Springs, and it sat. So it was a CRA that did nothing that cost the county, and it did no benefit to the city.
So they didn't incentivize the developers to come in and do it. I mean, that's up to us. I mean, if we can present a plan that shows that, we can get the redevelopment, I don't know why we couldn't be approved.
The way it was put to me was the beaches as a whole, our property values are, the highest. I mean, and Treasure Island is some of the highest valued property in Pinellas County. Not my opinion, again, what I was told. And for that reason alone, this area in Tarpon Springs was not a good area. Just like Lellman has had, its TIP district, South St. Pete, certain parts of Gulfport, etc. They're poor areas where people don't want to go in and develop. We don't have that issue. We don't have a problem with people not wanting to come in and buy property and develop it. We have a problem with our current property owners who've owned properties for decades who just don't have the ability at this point with cost of construction and everything else that comes with that. The return on investment isn't there. It's not that they don't want to do it. It's just the return on investment has to make sense, just like it does for us, as individuals. But nevertheless, we still are what is considered a wealthy community, and our property values are high, and people do want to develop here. We're not like South St. Pete used to be, or Lellman area, and so on and so forth. So that's how it was explained to me, because I was very curious about it as well.
Yeah, and Mayor, my apologies for kind of taking us down that little bit of a rabbit hole. But the reason we kind of brought that up was, we know that there's a lot of interest and emphasis in the downtown area. If this body wants to go a couple different ways, which is, hey, we've got a master plan, how do we start to implement some of those components? The code is one portion of that, but also what are those incentives or programs or partnerships to where it truly becomes like a P3 if that's the desire of this group? And does that mean that the county is involved with X? Ask. They're not they're not going to sit there and go, oh yeah, we're absolutely going to do that. Nor should, and I don't think anybody is sitting there saying, oh well, they're not doing this. But the reason we were saying, talk about the master plan, because we know that is front and center with a lot of people's minds. And how does that play into the code? And how do some of those big ideas start to take shape in the funding? And oh, by the way, how do we start to code some of those components? So again, there is a lot of different pieces and parts to this discussion. And it's because it's not just the code itself.
And can I ask, Mayor Brooks, you use PDs in Madera Beach, correct? Are you willing to give your opinion on, because research I've done and stuff, PDs are really what incentivizes and starts moving development. Can you kind of expand on how that helped you?
So I think PDs are controversial, like any development is, but in my opinion, the value in a PD is it allows the city the opportunity to work with the developer so that the city gets something back out of it. I mean, to put it simply, your planning department negotiates with the developer so that when the developer is building something, they could build it by right and the city gets nothing. If you give them a little bit more than by right, then the city usually, in a well-negotiated plan, the city ends up with great incentive and the developer ends up with something also, so it's a win-win for everyone. That is my personal opinion. That's how I've seen it work really well, not just in Madera Beach, but in many different communities.
When you talk about giving them something that goes beyond what the code allows, are you talking about height and density primarily?
Could be height, giving a couple extra stories. I have been my voice on height. You might not like the opinion, but very often, if you'll stop focusing on height and focus on the building itself, 2 stories doesn't really make that big of a difference, because if you could take, for instance, in Madeira, we have some buildings that were built, they're short and fat. There's no green space. You can't see around them. If we had allowed those buildings to have been built what was originally approved, which was a little bit taller, you can't really tell the difference of that a little bit taller. But when you go past those buildings now, you can't see around them. So just imagine you do a short, fat building that when you drive down the street, you can't see the beach. Let the building be a little bit taller, and you can drive down the street and see the beach. You can see around the building. And that is, I mean, that's my personal opinion. It's how I would vote, that you have to think beyond the height, think beyond the stories, and what does that look like when the building is built out for the community?
Yeah.
I'll comment on that one because I talked to my friend over on the other coast because they've gone through somewhat of a redevelopment, and we were talking about PDs. What the mayor was saying, basically, the downtown property is the perfect example of that. So let's say 5 stories is the cap. So, and we all know, I don't think any of us want the canyon effect where it's right on the road. So what they did was negotiate with the property owner that, okay, the front part of it is 2 stories. You have your cafes, you have your setback, you have everything we want. You have the shops, the mixed use, the retail at 2 stories in the front. And behind that, very similar to our Marriott, how it steps back in height, and nobody realizes in the back it's 10 stories or 9 or 10 stories high because of the way it steps back. And the way they did it, okay, so you're going to give the city the setback, so you're not creating a canyon effect, but behind that, instead of allowing you to go 5 stories, we're going to allow you to go 7 stories. So that's how they used it, and that was kind of the give and take. So we're getting what we want, which is that non-canyon effect with the setbacks and the coffee shops and cafes or whatever it is that they do. And then behind that, where you're really not paying much attention to, you allow them, give them an extra, couple stories in order to get what we want. That's how it was explained to me, and he used particular.
So Mayor Brooks, I agree with what you're saying about getting something around it's good for both, and that's what I've been talking about with the Thunderbird. I'm not talking about height at all. I'm talking about do we get some type of parking or what can we get for that we both, and then it's been crickets so far. So I just want something that we can both get something good out of it, and then along with the CRA thing, I think I agree with you. I don't think anyone's going to do a 30-year CRA anymore or any of that. But I think some of these, some of the other commissioners have said, it's something we would take a look at. And even if we could get 5 years, I want whatever we can get that will jumpstart development and that will, benefit both the city and
I could just say this, that in our city, our community development department works with the developers. And I'm sure it's no different here. The developer brings in a project. It goes to community development first. They start negotiating. They speak with us. And the community development department they're currently working in our city on a property or on a build. And I think they're doing a great job. I don't know exactly where the project is now, but we've been given some updates along the way. And I think that the community will like what will be presented based off what we've seen so far. But big kudos to that department, because that is who's really negotiating on your behalf, whether it is getting public restrooms, a place for concerts to be held, parks, parking, whatever that might be. And to Vice Mayor Vasquez's comments, when you're looking at a building nowadays, you see so many buildings being built that conceal the parking. And you can't even tell. And we are utilizing the step backs in Madeira, and it is so that you can not see the total height. One example of that in our city that's been there for quite some time is the parking garage down at Johns Pass. It doesn't look like a parking garage, but it is a parking garage. And it's taller than what you would probably realize because of the way it was designed and built.
Well, Thank you, Mayor Brooks, for attending today. I thought that was an interesting comment. By the beautiful fire station that you guys have in the city of Madeira Beach. One of the things to answer that, we want to hear from you that I think it kind of piggybacks off Commissioner Clark's comments was, I think in this process for the current property owners or the developers is for Kimley-Horn in the city to ask them what they're looking for from the city. Like, if for me to answer that question, I think it's simple. It's to find out the people that are currently trying to do something in Treasure Island, to invest in Treasure Island, to get things jump started, like Commissioner Clark was stating. I think that that's an important piece to this, and is adding in, is because they should be coming in, and it sounds like when they have the access to the tools and resources like we had listed out, that you could make things happen. I mean, Madera Beach has a public marina that's incredible. It's nicely well kept and well utilized, and I'm sure that there's future plans around that area as well as they continue to grow. So, number one, answering that question is to ask those folks, like, what are they looking for? Because I think that we've all heard, or I've been here for close to 40 years. It seems like there's restrictions, like Commissioner Vasquez was mentioning that they're running into. So if we can lift those restrictions, and that's what we're here to do today, I think that we can see some definitely progress move forward. Thank you.
Anyway, as a follow-up to that, talking specifically about our central business district, which, of course, it was torn down in 2023. We have 2 zoning districts down there right now, a planned redevelopment mixed-use core and a planned redevelopment mixed-use Gulf Beach. Trouble is, the city of Treasure Island did a redevelopment plan, and it was put in place back in 2009. And obviously it didn't work because nothing ever happened. What is the possibility of taking that and vacating those 2 type of all those restrictions, that redevelopment plan, and basically coming up with what we're talking about as a planned development, and ask the owners, hey, present us with what you want, and then we'll start negotiating from there. I mean, it's strictly what the PD is. And I personally would love to vacate that plan where the city is trying to tell the developer what he wants, or what the city wants, but turn the tables and say, okay, developer, tell us what you want, and let's go from there. And that's what I'd really like to see. And what do you think the possibility of doing that is?
So I'm going to go back to the comment you were saying, go ask the property owners. So that is part of our scope of services, is to meet with individuals as well. I mean, do the open house and schedule some of those opportunities. The one thing we don't want to do is we go meet with a bunch of people, and next thing you know, we're getting called to the mayor's office, and he goes, hey, by the way, you met with people, and we have no idea what's going on with the project. And I know that's not what you're saying, but more importantly, just knowing that this is kind of that formal kickoff to phase 2. This is what we need to be able to hear, need to understand, and also start to let staff know of who are the big players, when I say the big players, but who are those property owners that would really like to have a seat at the table and be talking with us on certain things. Brooke and I are working on a project right now over in Lakeland for the Dixieland CRA, 72-acre redevelopment centered on South Florida Avenue. We got lucky because we got Dixieland. Another team got the Midtown, which is 7,000 acres, which I'm like, God bless you all on that one. But, we've had a series of targeted discussions with the major landowners, and we have those scheduled because they've made the major investment in properties, and it's good to understand, okay, what worked, what didn't, what are they seeing, and what are they hearing, because I can come at it from a regulatory standpoint, I can come at it from a community outreach standpoint, but I don't have the skin in the game like some of the folks like the Wallers and some of the folks that are over there. To be able to understand, and even asking them, where else are you working that works and why? So similar type of approach that we do with all of our codes and all of our public facing projects. So but going back to your question, that's one of those things we'll need to be able to kind of review, vet, discuss, think through, and then more importantly, make sure we're not affecting property rights.
Because in our planning and zoning meetings, or LPAs, I'm always asking Joan, is she involved in projects that are potentially coming or whatever? Because I think that's important from that role's perspective. You look over in Madera Beach, you see their John's Pass, bumping, especially, Seafood Festival was last weekend. It's incredible to see that. You look across the bridge and we got Treasure Island. And from my perspective, like that's not going to cut it. So, and it's like, well, what do we need to be doing now to help this city move forward? I can tell you what we shouldn't be doing. It's the same thing that we've been doing the last 25 years, because look in the position that we're in. So that's why, I appreciate Commissioner Clark's push, let's get some things going. And again, for everyone's time today.
Yeah, I think that I've heard a couple people talk about Thunderbird, and I think that Thunderbird has a good plan, and I think that Thunderbird is not being heard. There's a couple of things that are taking place. First of all, if you asked anybody in the room, what is Thunderbird really looking for? Well, yeah, they're looking for additional height, but they're going to what they want to build is 6/1. And a lot of people were thinking, that, this is going to be 8, 9 stories, whatever. It's not. The other thing is that they also have the side setbacks are about 3 times what they are today. And that gives, as people pull up at 107th and Gulf Boulevard, it gives them a view of the Gulf. And that's very important. I mean, yes, they're going to have some parking there, so the cars are going to be there, but they're not building out. They're building up additionally, but it's giving them the opportunity to really make something and to have that wow factor when you come onto the island. And I think that's extremely important for us. Parking, they're going to be building, it looks like, about 181 rooms, but their parking is going to be someplace in the 240 range. And they're willing to talk with us about what they want to do with parking and have the city involved in what that's going to be. So I think that, a lot of it, I hear so much about height and density and what it's so bad and it's this, that, and the other, and it really isn't. I think that what we need to do is see somebody that really has the money to build it themselves. That's going to be important as well. I think that's going to be the item that gets everybody else on the island and developers off the island excited about what Treasure Island is going to do again.
I agree with Commissioner Clark that a give and take agreement is very important. Mayor Brook, I do have a question for you. I understand that Madeira Beach just went through a master plan. I want to know how much did it cost the city and how long did it take?
So we contracted with Kimley-Horn in April of 2024 for $150,000, and we are in the final phase of approval of that plan. I can tell you that our experience was fantastic. They were very engaged with the community. The approach that our commission has taken is it isn't about what the 5 of us want. It's about what the community wants. And they kicked off. We had no less than 12 meetings with staff that they did, monthly updates. They met with the community. We did town hall meetings where they came in and did these type of boards, had the community write down on sticky notes what they wanted to see in that master plan, as well as when we would have a community event going on, whether it was our monthly trash pickup that is conducted by Trash Pirates, or if it was a carnival or something else going on. See how I gave that plug to the Trash Pirates? They would come out and set up a table. And so they engaged in the community that way. So it was really for us, we're going to end up with a master plan that suits the community as a whole and not just a few people within the community.
Gavin, I have a question for you. Would it be a conflict for Kimley-Horn to do the master plan as well, if they submitted a bid?
I don't see one apparent right off. I mean, I think that as discussed in the workshop previously, they could submit a quote, or the city could request a quote and provide that at the November 4th meeting. If
as a commissioner, can I request Kimley-Horn to submit a quote for a master plan?
The answer to that would be no. What we need to do is go through the city manager, giving him authority to do that, and not you taking that authority to get in the middle of it.
I'll make sure they're aware of our quote soliciting that's going on this week.
Thank you, Charles.
And I just kind of wanted to tag a little bit off of what the mayor was saying, and I believe you as well, a couple of you as well. Exactly what you said about the Thunderbird, to me, is proof that talking to our property owners and our developers and seeing what they need and working with them, I wouldn't call it a PD because I don't think we can technically call it that, but that's what we're doing. We're negotiating with them, and that's the whole purpose. If we treat our developers and our property owners, commercial property owners, like they're the enemy, and, oh, they're greedy, oh, all they want is money, 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 money. Well, they want a return on their investment like all of us do if we make an investment, no different than the Thunderbird owners. The Thunderbird hasn't gotten as much, I'm not saying they haven't gotten a lot of negativity, but not as much because it's historic. We all love it. We all want to see it come back better than ever. However, just in the conversations, and we haven't even gotten down because we have to get past the next vote to where we're having the negotiations with them of how many public parking spots we can get. And I heard the same thing from them that John is. But if people refuse, if we as a board and the people as a whole refuse to speak to the very people that own our commercial properties and treat them like the enemy, we're not going to get anywhere. I don't care what we do, who we bring in. If we do the master plan, no matter who or what it is, if our private property owners don't buy into it, this is still the United States of America. They still own their property. And they've owned, again, the majority of them have owned it for over a decade or two or three in some cases. So the Thunderbird is definitely the perfect example of why working and listening to the commercial property owners and developers is so important, because then we can get a win-win for everybody, a win-win for the entire community. And I don't know of one property owner that I have spoke to in Treasure Island that does not want something beautiful. All but one of them live in Treasure Island, have families in Treasure Island. Why would they want a big, ugly concrete building? They don't. They want to look at something beautiful that they're proud of and that their kids are going to be proud of. But when we treat them like the enemy because heightened density, that's proof is what's happening with the Thunderbird of what is so important, and being a quasi PD, negotiations are so important.
So from Mayor Doctor's comment about heightened density not being that bad, I think that's obviously interesting. I know that we keep referring it to the Thunderbird. I just want to recall that it's for the entire district. It's not just for zone, not just for the Thunderbird. I think that's important to call out, because there is other opportunities. Mayor Brooks had made the comment about that I loved. The higher that you, she didn't make the comment about the height creating more green space down below. I think that's something that we really need to highlight, because the higher that you go, the more green you got below. So there's people out there that don't want height, but they also want more green space. So this is one of those things where you could get more green space down below if you do allow. So I was happy to see some of the progress that was made on Tuesday night's meeting, but I also think that it is conjunction, whether it's the Thunderbird or it's any of these other parcels, when it comes to, well, what's Johns Pass going to do? What's our downtown area going to do? So when it comes to, that's great that the Thunderbird and maybe some other ventures on Gulf Boulevard want to invest in Treasure Island, but I'm a firm believer that they are probably watching what is going to happen in downtown or what is going to happen in Johns Pass. So I don't know when's the right time, but if we are going to do, heightened densities or negotiations for that side, we probably need to also figure out from a downtown perspective. Like you can't have downtown be shorter or smaller than. I love that you're nodding your head, because so one of the questions I would have is like, wouldn't it, from all the work that you've done when it comes to a downtown area, is there some type of stat out there that says your downtown is usually the biggest, the highest, most density type of area compared to other units within a city or other zonings within a city? Because, again, I'm trying to get away from what we have stagnant today And if that's great, we're going to do all this stuff on Golf Boulevard. But if we don't touch these other areas, like Chairman Harris had mentioned previously, there's a good chance that nothing happens on Golf Boulevard because downtown's just going to look like what it is today. Johns Pass is going to look like it has the last 18 years or 22 years, whatever the number is.
I'm a huge proponent of right size, right place, and excuse me. There's not a hard and fast rule that we learn in planning school that says, okay, thou shalt have whatever. But you know, the downtown, that central business district, is the heart of the community. That's where the majority of your activities, whether it's residential or employment or retail, and civic functions, should really start to occur. And you know, think about this: when you fly out of Tampa or St. Pete or Orlando and all of those areas. Now, I know Orlando is one of those great places that you're only an hour from Orlando when you're driving through there. But that is not mine. I actually stole it from a partner of mine. But just look out the window. Where's the height in St. Pete? It's in that rectangle area between 375, 175, 275, going down to that point. And then it starts to taper. Look at, downtown Tampa. Look at where some of these components are because, you know, generally understanding that, you know, that's where a lot of your infrastructure is. That's where you can have additional height and it functions. Does it need to be 6 stories versus 20? That's a local preference at that point.
I have a question for Gary Volnak. What's your opinion and experiences on PDs?
In a previous life, I was a consultant and worked on several PDs. Typically, it was, as it's been previously discussed, a point of negotiation between the landowner, the developer, the city, the county, and it was usually a very successful process. There was give and take, but every project I was involved in came to successful fruition. So I'm supportive of it. I was a participant as the civil engineer, but there was also, you know, there were planners, architects, a lot of other.
I'd like to make a couple of comments here. One is about the downtown area. I'd love to see that develop too, but our downtown is a quarter-mile long. It's not downtown Tampa, and it's not downtown St. Pete. It is a quarter-mile long stretch of road, which is very close to to the beaches and stuff like that. So when you start talking about tall, even taller buildings downtown, I do get a little bit nervous about it. Another thing, when we talk about that we haven't talked at all about is what do the residents want? And we sit up here and we talk and we make a lot of sense in terms of what's right through a business perspective. I can tell you most of my constituents are not convinced that you have to do any higher than 5/1 to develop the downtown, to develop the beach. You might have to, but we haven't. We, the commission, the city, nobody has convinced most of our residents that a 5/1 plan doesn't work. So I think we need to, we need to prove to people that if you honestly believe that, you need to show it. And then let me talk about plan development agreements for a second too. I love 95% of what a plan development agreement occurs, but it scares the hell out of me. Excuse me for using that expression here, but it scares me a lot when I think that somebody in community development, and I'm not pointing this at anybody specifically, but that whoever might be negotiating that, let's say we settle on 6/1 or 80 feet maximum height, let's say that's what we end up. If we then say, okay, in addition to going to 6/1 or 80 feet, that community development has or the city commission, somebody has the authority to negotiate even over that. Say, okay, we know we gave you 80 feet here, but since you're going to give us a nice walking overpass over Gulf Boulevard, we're going to let you go another 2 stories beyond that. So I get that's the piece of the plan development agreement that I get nervous about is going even over what our code is, and we're about ready to. I mean, I'm going to continue to resist increasing height and density, but if that battle is lost, to give that flexibility that you can negotiate even more height by agreeing to some more public improvements scares me immensely.
Didn't you just vote yes for 50 at the last meeting?
I voted yes to remove RFM 30 from that code.
So just Commissioner Dickey. So in regards to the 5/1 on how it doesn't work, right? And you said your residents and yourself are not convinced that the 5/1 doesn't work. I wish we were in the other chamber so we could look out the windows and look over there, because it doesn't work. It's clear. The same restrictions that are there. And by the way, that is our downtown is designated by, I think, by the county as a activity center. Like it's supposed to be a bumpin', supposed to be a well-oiled event area or attraction, or however they want to describe it within their language. So I look over there and I say, 5/1, it ain't working. Same thing with John's Pass. Not working. What we have there today is not working. On top of that, in favor of a lot of people's thought process is they say they don't want a canyon effect. I think probably, I don't know the stat, but a lot of people aren't educated in regards to if something were built today on that property, it would be basically on the road. It's forced to be built on the road. So we have to change it. That is true. So we have to change it. So if we are going to go back and say, okay, well, we don't want these buildings on the road, because no one wants buildings on the road. We've all made that very clear. No one wants buildings on the road. It is going to come back. Well, what happens? Are we making the footprint smaller for the building? There has to be some type of conversation between whatever's going to go there and the future of Treasure Island, and that may increase and could create green space down below. It could create a walkway. Another thing that's more valuable to the city is if we can get downtown or Gulf Boulevard or Johns Pass going, it also helps 108th. You know, we have areas over on 108th that are going to be for city development. And if we can get all these projects working together, I wanted to add 108th to the conversation because that's us. We own it.
Yeah. Keep in mind as we're talking through this PD discussion, one comment that I made earlier is like the plan unit development does not give us carte blanche to go above and beyond the comprehensive plan. It still has to be consistent with those items. So there is in Brooke and I have written a number of codes where it's like, here's by right, you go to X. Above that requires a separate process or a separate thing, or it gets into some of the community benefits. There's a lot of examples around, and I'm just going to use this one because Brooke's been working on this with the city of Sarasota. With their parking incentives to where there's a trade-off for public parking versus increased square footage or some of those things. So there's a lot of tools in the toolbox that can be applied and more importantly, right-sized for this community. That's one of those great things about, we're not advocating for, again, 20 stories on a quarter-mile stretch. What's the context? What's that step down?
So the update to the LDRs, in the way in which those LDRs set density limits or height limits, when you have a PD, that it has to still stay within that. So that goes to this maximum. You still get the chance to do negotiation around that, but I think going forward we'll have to consider how that plays so that the PDs can actually be done. You can't keep it too restrictive, otherwise they basically have done nothing. So I agree with that. But that we're interpreting that correctly, Kelly?
Kelly, we're going to be taking a look at about 15 minutes and try to wrap it up. Then we're going to have some of the public comment.
I'm here to speak, keep writing stuff down, and Brooke taking a lot of notes. So this is your meeting, your workshop. So at whatever point you want to start pivoting or whatever, we're happy.
Okay, great.
I would like to make one comment to assuage Commissioner Dickey's fears. What we've talked about on the LPA is just something to kickstart the redevelopment of this city. And the fact is that we would set a maximum height, and that's what all I've ever heard is 7/1, 8 stories total. So I don't get the impression that we're going to go 8 stories today and then in 3 years come back 10 stories and another 3 years 12 stories. No, this is a one-shot deal, in my opinion. And I would be definitely against anything higher than 8 stories at this point. But we do need to have that tool in the toolbox. And I think it needs to be in any commercial district, any hotel district, and any of the last district, the downtown central business district. Thank you.
I think all these concerns that have been brought up just reiterate that the need for having a master plan. Mayor Brooks, you mentioned how I think you're getting better public buy-in because you have this master plan under development, and it's the reason our commission and the city's considering one now. So I'm encouraged that we can get this done if we actually have a master plan around it.
So Kelly, can we kind of talk about the timeline and the public outreach? Oh.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say thanks to everybody. It's a great meeting. Definitely thank you for your service. Just in regards to the CRA for Safety Beach, that's something I wasn't there for, so can't blame you. And then most recently, just a matter of public record, on May 20th, the county commission did approve Tarpon Springs as identified as blight, and for them to move forward with a new CRA on May 20th. So the county commission did vote May 20th to allow Tarpon Springs to move forward with a new CRA. So that's public record. I'm sure everyone will watch that meeting and hear the thoughts from all the county commissioners, because I don't think it's a monopoly spot. So is that water? I don't know what Tarpon Springs is. That on waterfront property? Yes, there is waterfront. Yeah.
It's not all water. It touches the water.
Yeah, but the Board of County Commissioners did approve May 20th blight in Tarpon Springs for them to move forward with the CRA. So that's public. So we're still not going to happen here. I didn't say that.
We'll definitely be talking about it.
Mayor, as far as what your schedule was, question, I put back up on the screen the schedule. This is the way that we had initially approached, and this is prior to the master plan discussion, of course. So, if we are thinking about the master plan, then I would definitely encourage us to have a little bit more discussion at this point as far as what is the end date, what's the goal between the master plan, the time frame, and the code. The one thing we don't want to do is to go down the pathway of we start doing, or we come up with phase 2, and the next thing you know, then the master plan comes and gets adopted or gets approved, and then we're flip-flopping stuff at the tail end, and it's the tail wagging the dog at that point.
No, I think you spoke earlier and said that, we really need to be on a consolidated timeline. It can be maybe a month or a couple of weeks, or it can be all at once. But yes, I agree with you that we need to begin that process talking with Kimley-Horn to see what we can get done.
I don't have any additional remarks, Mayor, so
Okay, so we will move into the public comment. And the first is Andrew Vasey.
I want to talk about 3 things: CRA, return on investment, and master plan. On the CRA, I don't believe Brian Scott speaks for the full body of the county commission. You have 2 other commissioners here today, and I think the issue of the CRA can be thoughtfully brought forward to the county commission under the premise that Treasure Island is not in a redevelopment mode, but a rebuild mode, given the hit we took from the hurricane and the amount of damage So our public facilities are, go across the street, our police and fire and little trailers. Other buildings are empty. Gary keeps building little sheds for everybody. So we need proper facilities. And the CRA can help fund that. I think the negotiations of the city with these developers need to be done by people who are informed of what a CRA is, or a TIP, and how it can be done. So we don't get something like a pretty face to a parking lot, but we actually get 200 parking spaces that are available for the city. And we trade them access to some tax-free bond financing as part of the development. I think this hasn't been thought out at all. I think that to say that the county commissioners won't consider it isn't advocating for our citizens. Why don't you say, well, I talked to the county commissioners who said that Treasure Island will never get it, and say, well, let's find a way to get it. If we can't get 30 years to roll up the longest CRA that the legislation allows, let's ask for 5. Commissioner Sheriff just mentioned 5. Commissioner Nowicki is sitting here. So this CRA topic is something that is ripe for discussion. And Treasure Island is not about how much income people make here. It's about the damage we sustained and the need that we need to rebuild in our infrastructure, our lift station, our sub-pump stations. Everything else is lost. No one's saying anything. We would go to the county commission with those kinds of requests. We're not looking to build a grand resort that's only a club for residents of Treasure Island and asking you to CRA that, but we're looking for actual improvements that we need for rebuilding. So I'd say that. On return on investment, I keep hearing that. Commissioners, the LPA, the investors over here, nobody put a number, there's not a piece of data out. Okay? So either you guys get smart enough to put some brackets around these guys on their return on investment, have them talk to you, show you some numbers, or else get smarter and realize if they're going to sell and you're going to greatly increase their profitability, then take a piece of it for the city or for the residents. But don't do what you're doing now. You're rushing to a second reading. St. Pete Beach last week said we're not even going to go to first reading until you, the developers, come back on that Coriel Avenue development and give us a better deal. And you're already through one reading and rushing to a second. You're not using your knowledge base to negotiate in the best interest of the residents. And as residents, we're not going to back down from coming after this. Thank you.
Thank you. West Evans.
West Evans, Isle of Palms. I'll keep mine short and sweet because Andy pretty much just touched on all of it. I believe the commission has the negotiating out of order. You don't pass the second reading of the ordinance and then
Testing 1, 2.
West Evans, Isle of Palms. Like I said, Andy kind of stole some of my thunder there. I believe the commission has the negotiating out of order. You don't pass a second ordinance and then decide to start negotiating. You do the negotiating beforehand. Everyone knows this. It's pretty simple. You find out what the developers want. You listen to the residents, find out what they want. Let's try to make something happen. And then you come back and start changing LDRs. You don't let one hotel's attorneys rewrite the LDRs just so they can sell off the land. And the new people buy it, and there's no negotiating to be done at that point. You got to do the negotiating beforehand. Thank you.
Krista?
So I don't want to repeat everything that they just said, but I'm going to say it starts with finding the necessity. So confirming that Treasure Island meets 1, 6, 3, 3, 4, 8, and 10. It's based on the evidence that actually exists: repetitive loss of properties, outdated infrastructure, and deferred maintenance. And other coastal cities, not Tarpon Springs, I'm talking Marco Island, Fort Myers, St. Pete there's open it's being done right now. I don't think we've done the work to actually do the application, but the data and the evidence is there. So I implore you to try, because I bet you there is a way to get some kind of funding. With that, I want to say thank you to the presentation team tonight. We definitely need a master plan. We know this language very, very well. You asked one thing about funding, and it's fiscal governance. And one thing our city's missing right now is the oversight of that. So what's not being said is a taskmaster to the master plan. So with it, this is great. There will be a plan. I see what you're doing in Madeira, but Madeira is missing two major components, and one is funding. And I will say, you have to be experienced to negotiate. So I am a little concerned that it's taken this long to even get to this point, and I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah, no, I exactly. And the master plan is basically having somebody who has the oversight, because I haven't heard, am I? Yes, okay. Which is intertwined with the community development. So it's two separate things, but intertwined, which I haven't heard. I've only heard about the planning, and not about the fiscal governance. That's a major portion of it, which would be identified by somebody as a master planner. And then you have the tiers below them, which are the urban design and architecture, the engineering and infrastructure, the federal, state, and coordination is also with program funding support, in addition to specialized technical, mobility, and hydrology.
Yeah. And one thing I did not hear in this is the first 60 days of this could be onboarding vendors with an RFQ. Somebody asked, how do you pay for this? You have to set the appropriation so it's actually accurate, and then you go to market, and you establish the best meeting of the minds team to bring this forth over the next 5 months. And so essentially you could look at a phase plan of procurement governance, then you do contracting mobilization, and then you do your master plan development and engagement. We've already waited this long, guys. Let's do it right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mitchell?
I don't know if I need a microphone, but it's here, so I might as well use it as it's on. So Mitchell Shanklin, Isle Palm, 30-year resident here, Treasure Island, chairman of the 2010 Vision Committee, 2015 Vision Committee, on the LPA, on the P&Z. In 2014, we approved a PD for downtown redevelopment. 2014, that's how many years ago? I don't have a calendar here, calculator. It's a long time ago. Nothing's happened. Okay? I'm tired of seeing this town looking like a slum. It's time to move forward. Whether the residents of, excuse me, Mr. Dickey, but the residents of Sunset, I'm sorry for them. They got their properties destroyed. You know, we all have gone through hell. It's time to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Sean Burns?
I'll keep it short and sweet. Seems to be the discussion about people selling off the land once it's changed. And then what really doesn't make sense is about financing. I'm not sure where the financing part comes in. I'm honestly baffled by some of the comments. It's clear that people in the room have never developed anything, as it's very easy to find financing if you have a project that makes money. I mean, it's not hard to find money if you have a project that makes money. It doesn't make money, so then there's no financing. It's that simple.
Thank you, Sean. Marcus Winter?
Good afternoon, Marcus Winters, Isle of Capri, also a business owner and property owner in town. Just a couple of things. One, I was a little late coming, but I think the city needs to adopt a PD process. I'm currently involved, and I've been involved in Madeira Beach for the last couple of years, and we're getting ready to go to a neighbourhood meeting with a PD project within Johns Pass. And just going through that, you take what the area has to offer, what the residents want, what the business owners want. Nobody's building a project that you can't put people in, that people are not going to be interested in being in. You want to build a project that the locals are going to support you. They're your customers. We don't have that in Treasure Island, and the city has had itself handcuffed for years. This is why we have not seen any developed in this town, because people know you could not develop in Treasure Island. I hear height 5 over parking. I hear a height restriction of 60 feet. I live in a house in the 50s. I have an 8-foot ceiling. I go into any new building that has a 9 or a 10-foot ceiling. That's what people are building now. That's what our visitors coming to Treasure Island. They want modern places to stay. They don't want to stay in something that was built in the 50s. 5 floors, 10 feet is 50 feet. We got to put something in between the floors to hold the building up. That's 2 feet maybe on some of it. We're at 55, 60 feet. We got to have 13 foot for a fire truck to go underneath it. Now we're at 73, 74 feet. We're not building anything bigger than what's here. What's the difference at 60 feet to 80 feet? You go downtown and go into a building, look at the 5th floor, then get off at the 6th floor and see what the difference is. There is no difference at that height. Build it high enough that you can have some green space, have some space between the building. We got this city of the Treasure Island Resort. What did the residents get for that? Nothing. The only thing we inherited from that resort is it's harder to get a table in middle grounds because it's so busy, because their restaurant, they built it so small, they're restricted so much, we didn't get anything from it. You can't park there. It's you know what I mean. As a resident, I gain nothing from it. Second point I wanted to bring, or a couple of points. When you're doing the LDRs and you're doing restrictions, I would also like to think about parking. Our parking restrictions, I'll be quick. Our parking restrictions very restrictive. Nobody's taking into account Ubers. Everybody here, I'm sure, has an Uber app on the phone. People that come now, I own caddies down there, a lot of my customers come by Uber. But I'm still restricted as to what seats I can have, as to how much parking I have. And then the last thing is just, one thing I would like the Commission to consider is, we all learned from the storm last year. If a hotel gets damaged, or if a house gets damaged, they can rebuild back to the original footprint. A business can't. Caddies down there, I would like to, I'm putting $750,000 into a building that if it gets a flood next year, it's going to flood again. I would like to build a building that will stand a flood, but I'm losing 25 foot off Gulf Boulevard, I'm losing 20 feet each side, I'm left with a little matchbox inside it, and it doesn't make any sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. And this will be our last public comment for the evening. Bill Karn.
I'm Bill Carnes, former 20-year resident here in Treasure Island, currently residing in Madeira Beach. Builder and a developer. I've done over 8 PDs along the coastal communities here. PDs are a long and arduous process. They don't happen overnight. You have neighborhood meetings, you have planning and zoning meetings. You have ultimately it goes before the commission. The commission decides on a PD. Staff doesn't decide. You work with staff as a builder and developer. We are just putting through another PD, which Marcus was talking about in Johns Pass. You can't do a building with a floor of parking, a building that's 5 over. You're not going to have enough parking. You have to have more parking. We're doing the Madeira Beach Town Center down on 150th Avenue. That building has retail on the ground floor. It has 2 floors of a parking garage. And then it has a wedding cake that goes up. The building's a total of, I think, 90 feet, Marcus, I think is the total of that building. We got a little extra height there. But what did the city get? They got public access, 20-foot sidewalks all the way around the property. They got a half-an-acre park right on the corner of Gulf Boulevard and 150th Avenue for the whole community to enjoy. They got infrastructure, sewer, water. Everyone thinks that a builder or developer's going to come in, they're going to do one job and retire. Sorry, I'm 67 years old. Been doing this for 44 years. One project doesn't make or break you. It's a career. It's a profession. You have to have thoughtful development, and it all starts with a PD. The master plan, great idea. You have a master plan. What you really need is a PD. So individual property owners can build something that makes sense. And it gives the city a chance to say, hey, this is what we need. We need public access. We need more green space. We need infrastructure work done. These are the things that the city needs. And who pays for it? The builder and the developer. When you put these through for financing, that's another arduous process. Banks just aren't going out and handing out $50 million, $100 million. It's got to pencil itself out. It has to have a return on investment. It has to be profitable. Or no bank's going to finance it. I've done 8 PDs. They work. Painful for the developer because you have to give up so much, but very beneficial for all of the communities that we've done these in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. Eric Norrie.
Hi, I'm Eric Norrie. I'm a resident of Isla Capri and a business owner here in Treasure Island. Own the Treasure Island Car Wash and several pieces of property alongside of it. I'm not a developer of 44 years. I'm just kind of getting into this thing. The thing that I've found to be very difficult, I've come to the city on several occasions saying, I've got these properties. I'd like to know what you guys would like to see there. I'd like to build it. And I haven't had anybody step in my door yet. And I think that would be helpful to be able to sit down and do a PD. I think the master plan sounds like a poor idea because we have one that's not been utilized. And you have to go to somebody like people that own land and say, okay, this is our master plan. Now you build it. I've already spent 40 grand in just architectural fees, civil engineering fees for a 790 square foot coffee shop with a deck on it to try to figure out how much parking I can get there. I've gone back and forth with the city, back and forth with Jackie, back and forth with everybody. I'm thinking 40 grand on plans for a 790 square foot coffee shop with a 30 by 30 deck and 16 parking spaces is a little bit excessive, but I'm not in this business. But I keep going back because we go to the city and then, no, you can't do this. So you got to go back and say, well, can you do this? No, you can't do this. So then you go back. It just seems like a big waste of money and time. But I don't know. That's just my experience of buying property 5 years ago here in Treasure Island. And so far, they are lots with some weeds growing in them that I'm trying to kill as much as I can. But I really would love to do something really nice for Treasure Island. And I think the master plan is a waste of time. I think elevating downtown is a great idea. I think that we can all do it in a responsible way that doesn't make our city look like a overrun, trafficked out, hundreds of thousands of people. I think we can have a good community with raising the height density and not getting so stuck on some of the minutia that we're getting stuck on. We seem to go 2 steps forward and then 10 steps back. Changing things. I mean, it's been a year for a seawall. Just to put a seawall behind my house has been 1 year. It just got approved. A year for a seawall. It's very, very, very difficult as a developer to sit on money and just watch it go down the drain as you wait for everybody to make decisions. And a master plan, if you're talking about another 12 to 18 months to see what we can do then, what can we do after 12 to 18 months? We can sit there and watch more money go down the drain and look at broken buildings and lots with nothing built on them. Or we can get moving and be a little more lenient with some of the regulations and maybe stop like fighting, backbiting, bickering so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Philip Rooney.
Thank you. I'm Phil Rooney. We're the developers of the Nordvin. I don't know how many projects are going on right now, but I just thought, I didn't plan on speaking, but I thought it might be helpful to hear about the economic circumstances of our project and why it's happening. So the project originally had it was a $7 million purchase, and I'd be happy to anybody here to open the books up because it sounds like there are some problems with people understanding what the math looks like for development here. So you got your land basis, which was $7 million. We had a concrete structure built in '82 that was the only thing worth anything was the concrete. Everything else had to go. We're looking at a $400 a foot renovation budget. It's 18,000 square feet. If we were to tear it down, we'd be looking at about $300 a foot in land cost. And in hotel development, you need to be 150K or under to make anything work, and that's at very high rates. I mean, right now we are forecasting a 350 ADR. We would have had to spend $100 a foot to make a 350 ADR work if it were not for the change to the zoning that allowed for F&B. Now we just went through our special exception application process. That was our saving grace. Without that, this project would have been a half-completed shell, and it would have just sat there. And we're still taking a huge risk, right? We're $5 million in cash into this thing. We've got a $7 million loan. That's not much leverage. You're asking for investors to really put their neck out there. And we're not talking about big returns. Right now, the equity market, debt funds are paying 10, 12%. That's really solid money for not a lot of risk. Flip that to the risk of an investment like this, and the best I can offer my investors is maybe 16, 17%. Basically, this is a long-winded way of saying fundamentally the problem is density. And the banks dictate that. The equity markets dictate that. I'm not rich. My car's outside. 150,000 miles on it. I live in Lakewood Estates. I can't afford to live down here. So the idea that, developers are just rich guys coming in, look, some are, for sure. And on the PD side, I would say PDs can be good and bad because a PD can be, if you get a good negotiator at the city, great, but at the same time, they introduce an element of uncertainty and time to a development that then drives up required investor returns. Is that actually helping you? Or does just getting your master plan and your zoning straight maybe engage an economic development firm that does consulting that will come in and say, look, here's the actual true cost of developing your community. Here's where your land basis needs to be per unit, per square foot to incentivize the market. Look, if development worked here, there's tons of developers out there that want to make money. If there were deals to be had in this town with as beautiful as it is, they'd be getting built. That's all I got.
Thank you very much. I want to wrap up now by thanking everybody for being here today. And we appreciate our commissioners, county commissioners, our mayor from Madeira Beach, and everyone else. And with that, we will adjourn. Thank you very much.